We're going to talk about three particular topics today: sensation, perception, and consciousness. Now, sensations are the stimuli that our body receives. We talked about the thalamus being the filtering system for those to determine which stimuli, which sensations are important and need a response from us, and which ones do not. Okay, so the sensation is the act of experiencing a stimulus. Perception, on the other hand, is our interpretation of that stimulus. So say you hear a loud noise. Okay, you immediately react, jump, tense up in response to the noise. You've experienced the stimulus, but until you ascertain where the noise came from or what the noise was, you haven't perceived the noise yet. Okay, so sensation may or may not become a conscious experience of a stimuli, whereas perception is the conscious processing or interpretation of that stimulus. Now, we all know the 5 basic senses, right? Seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting. However, there's a 6th one, and it's not like in the movies. It is proprioception. It's your body's ability to know how close you are to the chair behind you so you sit down in it and not fall on the floor. It's how it's your body's awareness of where it is in relation to space and other objects. So I can lean on the door without looking to make sure the wall is there. I'm just aware of where I am in space in relation to other objects. That is proprioception. Okay? One other term you want to keep in mind is transduction. And transduction is simply the process of taking that stimuli and converting it to an electric impulse so that our neurotransmitters can submit it to the brain. Okay? So transduction is converting the stimuli into an electrical impulse that can then be passed on to the brain. Just keep that in mind. When we're talking about stimuli, there is what we call the absolute threshold, or the minimum amount of the stimuli necessary for us to become aware of it. Okay, so the absolute threshold, the minimum amount required for us to detect it. So how cold does it have to be in here before I start to shiver and think I need to put on my jacket? Absolute threshold. How strong does an odor have to be before I become aware of it? How loud does a noise have to get before I respond to it? Absolute threshold. And then there's the difference threshold. How much more of a stimulus do I need for me to again become aware of it, or for me to notice a change? Let's take a glass of sweet tea, for example. Say I have a large glass of sweet tea in front of me and I put 2 packets of sugar in it, stir it in, and I drink it. I decide it's not sweet enough. How much more sugar do I need to add before I become aware of the fact that it is now sweeter than it was? And the answer is not in a fixed amount, but it's in a proportion. So, using that same example, I'm probably going to have to double the amount of sugar in that sweet tea before I notice that it is definitely sweeter. Okay, this is Webster's law, that I have to increase a stimulus by a proportionate amount, not a fixed amount, for me to again become aware, okay, of that difference threshold, or the JND. Those are the initials, JND, just noticeable difference. Same thing as the difference threshold. And that is described by Webster's law, the amount of increase necessary for you to notice a change in the stimulus is proportionate to the original intensity of the stimulus. Okay? Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about your different senses. You know what they are. You know how to use them. But I want to make a couple of things aware to you. When we're talking about sight, there is something that we call blind sight. It's like you saw it, kinda. Your brain saw it, but you're not aware that you saw it. It's not being able to consciously report on seeing a car drive away from the scene, but when asked what color the car was, you can tell them it was red. You can answer questions about what you saw, even though without prompts, you can't recall seeing it. It didn't make it to your conscious processing, but somewhere in there was stored away that you saw a red car speeding away from the scene. Okay? Blind sight. You saw it, your brain remembers it, but it never made it to your conscious processing. The other thing to keep in mind is sensory interaction. I don't just experience something with only one sense, just seeing, or just hearing, or just smelling. If something smells good, and I eat it, I have invoked both smell and taste, and if it looked good, then sight, to experience the meal that I just ate. Your senses work together. They work in harmony so that you can experience a stimulus. So keep that sensory interaction in mind. Okay? Now, how many of you have heard of selective hearing, or accused your children of it, or accused your significant other of selective hearing? Well, there's really some truth to it. It's called selective attention, and it's what allows us to drown out background noise and focus on the conversation we're having. So, for example, if I gave us a free-for-all for 5 minutes, I let anybody talk about anything they wanted to in class. Your senses, you will be able to select where to focus your attention. Obviously, you can't take in all 12 conversations that would be happening at the same time, but you can listen to the one you're most interested in or the one closest to you, and block out the others as background noise. Okay? So that selective attention really does exist. Another thing to keep in mind is sensory adaptation, and this is usually related to our sense of smell. How many of you have lit a new candle or plugged in a new air freshener in a room, and then after a while you can't tell that the odor is still there? You become desensitized to that particular scent. But if you leave the room for 10 minutes and come back, now you can smell it again. Okay, sensory adaptation. Your senses are going to stop registering that stimulus after a prolonged period of constant exposure. It's no longer important for you to be consciously aware of it, and so your senses are basically just kind of freeing up memory, freeing up space to process any new stimuli that might be more important, that might need a response from you. Okay? Another important concept to keep in mind is your expectations. Most of us have expectations when we're going to go shopping in a new store, we're going to go try a new food, we're going over to a relative's house. Either based on experience or based on what other people have told us, we're going to have some preconceived notions or some expectations. The thing to remember is that those expectations can actually alter the way you experience something. Say you go to your favorite restaurant, you order your favorite food, and the waitress comes back and tells you that they're out of that and you need to order something else. But you had your mind set on eating that. It doesn't matter what else you order, you're not going to like it that night because it wasn't what you expected. It wasn't what you were hungry for. It didn't satisfy your expectations. Just like that, our expectations on a daily basis alter our perceptions of the way events occur. So think about personal prejudices or biases. Those all fall under this category. These expectations that change the way we experience our life events. Now, Chapter 5 gets into what we call consciousness. your conscious awareness. Now remember, Sigmund Freud is the one that brought to our awareness the concept of unconscious processing. The fact that stuff's going on in our head that we're not aware of. Okay? Consciousness can be altered, and it can be defined as, for our purposes, your subjective awareness. So perception is subjective. Our expectations are subjective. That means that our consciousness has to be subjective. Everyone's going to experience the same event just a little bit differently because we have a different background coming into it. We had different expectations coming into the event or the activity. And so we're all going to walk away with a little different perception of what happened and how enjoyable it was. Okay? Your consciousness, again, your subjective awareness of yourself and your environment. There are some ways that we can alter our consciousness, and by altering our consciousness, we also alter those perceptions. Okay? Sleep. We all know it's important, right? Most of us don't get enough. But it impacts both your mood and your performance. It impacts your processing. So something occurs and you're really tired, your reaction time may be delayed. It may take you a little longer to get up out of the way if something's going on. Okay? Sleep has a big part in allowing your body to recover, allowing your mind to recover. And which part of the brain was it that was responsible for blocking stimulus to allow you to sleep? You look it up. Sleep is critical for your overall health and well-being. It also affects, changes, alters the way you perceive the world around you. Psychoactive drugs, another way to alter your consciousness. Some people take these as a regimen to control mental illness. Antidepressants fall under this category. Any medication whose purpose or goal is to affect your mood, because it also affects your perceptions. Okay? I talked at the beginning of the semester about schizophrenia and how that is a biological illness that requires both medical treatment and psychological treatment for those people to live productive lives. Okay? It is possible to treat it, not possible to cure it, but possible to treat it so these people can live in the same world that we do. The purpose of those psychoactive drugs that treat that is to alter their perceptions. Remember, I said their brain doesn't filter out the important stimuli from the unimportant stimuli. And so they're just constantly overstimulated, and that messes up their perceptions. So the medication that they take has the intention of altering their perception. Then there are other ways, like meditation or hypnosis, that we can use to alter our consciousness. Okay, with hypnosis, the more suggestible that you are as an individual, the more likely is that it will work for you. What does meditation do? You make the conscious effort to clear your mind and focus on one thing, whatever it may be. Okay? Without drugs, you're altering your consciousness. You're altering your state of awareness. Just keep in mind that whatever we do to alter our consciousness or our state of awareness, it is altering our perceptions. It is altering the way we are going to experience stimuli at that time.